Today, families with children will receive monthly payments from the Biden administration starting in July, and a Space Force commanding officer was reportedly fired after criticizing Marxism and critical race theory in the military. We have got a lot coming up this Monday, and it starts right now. Welcome to the News and Why It Matters. I'm Sarah Gonzalez. Happy Monday, I guess, if you can say that. It's a Monday. I'll start there. I am joined today by BlazeTV contributor Eric July, back in the house. Thanks for being here. Also joined by the one and only Stu Burkier, host of Stu Does America, which can be found on BlazeTV, also on YouTube. So don't forget to subscribe to Stu Does America. I think if you type in Stu, it's like the first one that
it's
should
right
be there.
Don't miss it.
There's not many Stews.
No, people don't like that name. They stopped naming their kids that.
Well, because they heard that that's what your name was.
That's
like,
kind of what started it, yes.
We don't like that name. All right. So parents with children who qualify for Joe Biden's expanded child tax credit will begin to receive their monthly payments on July 15th. So this is part of the COVID-19 stimulus package, and about 39 million U.S. households. This is which house 88% of the children in the United States. So overwhelmingly will begin receiving monthly payments from the federal government. This is with no strings attached. Now, under Biden's plan, the maximum child tax credit in 2021 was increased to $3,600 for children under the age of 6 and to $3,000 per child for kids between 6 and 17. The tax credit will be paid monthly in advance instead of when families file for their taxes. Here's the thing, like, I feel like as a working mom who was hit by COVID, and when I say hit by COVID, I mean I pulled my child out of school and homeschooled him, I feel like I can speak maybe as a person who, like, this is, I'm affected by this. And I would just like to say, I'm good if you just, like, I just don't want to pay the taxes towards the schools. If you could just exempt me from that, I don't need the tax credit. I don't need it. No, thank you. I just don't want to pay at the end of the year or at the beginning of the year. I don't want that bill to show up with all of the taxes that I have to pay for the school district for a bunch of teachers who sat around on their lazy asses.
Yeah, wouldn't that be fantastic if you could just keep your money instead of it being stolen from you and then redistributed? And sometimes they word it in a way that you get it back, but quite often that's not how it works. They dipped into a pool of money that isn't there, and then they paid you with that. Now, I was looking into this, and I was trying to figure out who all is going to be eligible for it, and it does seem a significant portion of the population is going to be eligible for it, but unfortunately, regardless of whether or not you actually worked it yourself. So if that was your money, which again, that's not really how taxation in this country works anyway, but let's assume if it was the best case scenario, you would dip it into your own pocket. Like the government just stole your money, they put it in this little safe and you just reached in and got it because it was yours. Like they say Social Security works, but that's not how that works either. Right. Then you would at least have something to run on, but that's not generally the case. What this is it speaks more to the wealth redistribution in terms of like the welfare statism, not just tied to COVID-19, but generally with everything, where you're incentivizing people to, in this case, you got children, well, here you go, you're going to get laced up with X amount of money. Now, unfortunately, a lot of brainlets that work with the federal government, they act like that's not a thing, where, from where I'm from, I've seen that so often, where, yes, people do have kids for the sake of the government money that they get that's generally associated with it. Sometimes it's not in a direct form of a paycheck, but sometimes it's in the way of like housing and stuff like that. But that's always been the danger of welfare statism, is it not? It's like, so as long as you're at this level, you get it, you'll get above it, or you're not making that requirement, then, well, you don't get access to any of that money. But that right there, as far as what you suggested, which would be the preferential thing, is like, okay, this was an adjustment I made. How about you stop stealing from me? That would be preferable, but that's not what they generally want, because that would then associate you with you as an individual, rather you as a family household, and how you actually pay into said system or how much you get stolen from the system. But they don't want that because, again, a lot of folks wouldn't be able to reap the benefits in the event that was the case. So I suggest this all the time. Like, okay, how about this? My kid's not in your school. Let me just keep the money.
Right.
I'm not asking to go take my kid to the school and obviously not paying a tax. No, or paying in the tax. No, just let me keep the money. I'll keep it. Y'all go run that bad boy into the ground. I'm just not going to pay for it. I feel like most people, when it comes to their own kids, they would rather have that be the situation. But unfortunately, the government says, no, you will go that crap school that you need to be sending your kid to. You need to send them to, and if you don't go, it doesn't matter. We're still going to steal from you.
And by the way, it's going to to be double dipping now because you're going to have to pay those taxes, and then somebody's paying for this child tax
it may not be
credit.
you, but somebody's got to pay
it. They're double dipping here. Stu.
Oh God, you're depressing me.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
As a person who lives in a town with very high tax rates for schools, does not send their kids to them, then pays an additional amount to send them to a different school so they don't have to deal with the school that they're in, and then also now is going to pay for other people's tax credits so that they cannot send their kids to the school I don't want to send my kids to. This is a lot of fun. I mean, it's working out really well.
It seems very efficient.
Yeah,
honestly.
Although I will say on the other, it's
Yeah.
true. Luckily, the cure to COVID-19 is cash. We found out apparently the only way to get rid of it is to spend unlimited amounts of money on God only knows what that has nothing to do with COVID-19. As you point out, like this has been a weird year, right? And like some of the stuff is really difficult. We've had businesses closed down. I went by a movie theater near our house today that closed down, and like all those coming soon posters are just all blank. And it just sucks, man. This has sucked so badly. But like, I think the American people, even on the conservative and somewhat to the libertarian side, even have said, like, look, we get that these businesses closed and the government forced them, and we'll allow a little more than we're comfortable with here.
Right, like it shouldn't have happened, but it did.
But it did. So what are we going to do to these
something.
people who got screwed?
Yeah.
And I think that's a legitimate way of looking at it. And I think when you look at these programs, I don't like them, obviously. But I mean, it's also we have to. Even no less a figure than Ayn Rand took money from the government when the laws benefited her. And I think the justification's simple in that, like, you got to deal with all the crappy rules they make. If one's going to benefit you, there's no shame in taking it. However, freaking change it, right? Like, I want this stuff. I do want it to be changed. I can understand why you could make arguments, I think, with people for targeted government safety nets at this point.
Yeah.
But like these broad-based, 88% of all parents in an economy that is back largely, right? We're at a point where we've come a long way back. The states that have decided not even to be aggressive, like a Florida or even at some level of Texas, but like even the states that were like moderate, kind of open up later, they're even back now. We're only waiting for the Cuomos and Gavin Newsoms of the world here. That's it. And even those states wound up getting the same amount of tax revenue or more than they got before the pandemic. So like this is it's just scattershot of cash. And we can see how much of this, I think by the design of this program, has nothing to do with COVID. Mm-hmm. If you want to have a tax credit because of COVID, okay, you can make that argument, and I'll probably whine about it a lot, but they don't care if I whine about it. However,
they don't?
No, they don't care at all. I've noticed that. The Biden administration does not seem to care what I whine about. They don't change anything that I say. It's so weird. But when you're prepaying it, you are priming this for a universal basic income type of thing, where the government looks at this. This is one of there are actually some libertarian economists out there who have suggested, what if we just get rid of all of these programs and we'll just send you some cash and you do what you want with it, right? Like, so we don't have to have all the bureaucracy. Mm-hmm. We'll just simplify it all. We realize we're not getting rid of the welfare state. Let's just simplify it, give people cash, let them do what they want. And there's things to like about that, right? You probably would certainly save a lot of money. On the other hand, though, there's that government dependence, and I don't like. This is one of the reasons I didn't like. What was that the fair tax thing, which was like a national sales tax? One of the things they did was sort of every single citizen gets a check from the government every month as part of that program, and when you get the government, like when you're relying on that, it's hard to get rid of. And I feel like what the left is doing, and if I was going to give them credit, I would say smartly, right? For their way of doing business is to use this crisis and get people used to a steady stream of cash coming into them, so that these policies are things they're not going to be able to rip out when it's over.
Well, and I mean, we saw that. The most recent example I can think of just from my line of work is Obamacare, that once they started getting these people, they were able to get an insurance plan with no pre-existing conditions, all of these things. Then when you talk about repealing it, their messaging was always, well, they want to take health care away from all of these people. They want people to die in the streets. I can't believe these Republicans. They just want people to die. They don't want you to be able to go see a doctor. And at the same time, Stu, to your point, that all of this is happening, the Biden administration is already pushing his American Families Plan, which is another $1.8 trillion. And that would actually expand this child tax credit through 2025. And then, of course, 2 years of free community college, free pre-K education, federally funded paid family and medical leave programs, increase Obamacare subsidies. Because it worked so well the first time, they need to add to it. So, I mean, we already see them kind of moving and shifting the goalposts. Now that they've gotten this, it would be very easy for them, as Stu was saying, to just be like, well, what do you want to take this money away from these parents? They're using it to, what do you want to rip the food out of these kids' mouths? I mean, you just hear the talking points already?
That's how they get you, and this is why I know, albeit maybe angrier than what a lot of people would like me to be, but I'm always talking about holding that line in the event that you're facing some sort of crisis, manufactured or not. Yeah. You have to remain principled, because what you do is you leave the door open for just like that. If anything, we don't even have to go back to Obamacare. We can just look at the last year. That's the utter failure of universal basic income. Mm-hmm. You saw with the recent jobs numbers where you had folks that, I mean, you got these businesses which can't hire people, not because they aren't willing, because people aren't working or they don't want to work. Montana, states as such have to say, all right, we're not participating in sort of the federal unemployment benefits anymore because it's having this impact on our economy. Well, that's what you do. And the way that I continue to word it is that you're incentivizing bad behavior. You're paying for it. So you say, doesn't matter what you do. Doesn't matter if you're a producer. Doesn't matter if you're productive. We're going to give you money. And they get it. You think that every single individual is going to be determined enough to be able to, all right, well, I got that money, let me go and continue to work. No. A lot of people are like, oh, I didn't have to do anything for it, and it's going to pay for this, this, and that. Why would I need to be productive? So that shows you the utter failure, but it also shows why you can't give these guys an inch, because that's what happens. It's no such thing as this temporary government program. Just like it didn't even take long with Obamacare. You get like 8 months of it, and you're like, wait a minute, we need to go back on it. They say exactly that. Well, you're going to take X and O from this person and that type of person. You're going to kill this person off and all that, because what they have, they got you. It's a trap. It always is. And now you're dependent on that. And to be fair, some people actually are dependent on that, whether they put themselves in that situation or they got there involuntarily. Two different subjects. But let's say they're there regardless. Of course, it's going to be harder to pull that back because they say, well, this person is not dependent. So why you have to hold the line. Even when it's difficult, you have to say, no, get the hell out of the way.
Yeah, last words, Joe.
I would just agree, and you know, I've seen specific examples of this when it comes to the government extra employment. I mean, I know people who came back and like had a job that they didn't love, you know, and weren't like thrilled with. Wasn't really a career for them. It was just a job, and you know, they made enough money to get by, but not enough money to excel. And they thought to themselves, well, I can work 40 hours a week to take a $200 pay cut or a $300 pay cut. Or I can do nothing and have the government give me that money, and I can do something that I want to do. And like, look, you set up the incentives, and people make decisions based on their own self-interest, and it's honestly a rational choice. Why would you go bust your ass and then have to find maybe childcare for your kids, or who knows what else, a dog walker for your dogs, all the expenses that come along with working, the gas and everything else. Why would you do that to make less money? There's no person on earth who would make that choice. It's hard to blame anybody for doing it. And at the end of the day, if you want this to come back to what we all want it to be, which in theory is normal, whatever that was. I can't barely remember it. But if we want to get back to that time, you have to allow the American people to go back to work and do their thing, and you can't incentivize them and pay them not to.
Yeah.
Maybe there was a time for a little bit of this, maybe way back, like a year plus ago, but now we're to the point of absurdity.
Yeah. All right. We've got more to come. First, we want to thank our sponsor, Bambi. So we're talking about all of these businesses getting back to work. If you are a small business owner, an entrepreneur, you realize that HR issues can totally kill your business. You can have wrongful termination suits that you have to be a part of, minimum wage requirements you have to deal with, and labor regulations. There's only about 10 million of those because we're dealing with big government bureaucracy. By the way, HR manager salaries are not cheap. They're like $70,000 a year on average. Okay, so Bambi, it's BAMBEE, was created specifically for you, the entrepreneur. You can get a dedicated HR manager, craft HR policy, maintain your compliance, all for $99 a month. Now, I'm not great at math, but I believe that $99 a month is actually way cheaper than $70,000 a year. All right, they're going to change your HR from your biggest liability to your biggest strength. They have an HR manager that's available by phone, email, or real-time chat. They can do onboarding. They can do terminations. They will customize your policies to fit your business and manage your day-to-day. $99 a month, you guys. It is month to month. There are no hidden fees. You can cancel anytime, but you're not going to because you are going to love it. All right, you can go to Bambi.com/matters right now. Schedule your free HR audit. It is Bambi, BAMBEE.com/matters. Schedule your free HR audit. The Supreme Court has agreed to hear arguments in an abortion case out of Mississippi that pro-life proponents hope could result in some sort of rollback of abortion rights that were established with Roe v. Wade. This was announced in an order today that it would take up the dispute. It is called Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, and the case concerns an abortion law passed in Mississippi in 2018 that prohibits abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy, with some exceptions. Now, this law had been blocked by lower courts, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, which obviously cited the Supreme Court precedent that is currently in place. The court's decision is it should happen beginning in October is when the term starts. So they should hear this case in the fall, and a ruling can be expected by the summer of 2022. So ruling not happening anytime soon. There are a lot of left-leaning activists who have believed and would have you believe that Donald Trump's nominees to the Supreme Court were going to overturn Roe v. Wade. It's always people dying in the streets, right? It's like there were going to be women dying in the streets this time around. Man. It's always people dying in the streets, which is weird because I don't typically see that when I walk around any city. I don't know that I have total confidence in the Supreme Court to undo something like that. I don't see this. I don't see this being, and I don't see them changing anything. Yeah. I wish that, again, I'd love it if they would, but I don't have much faith in that. Yeah,
that's, I think, unfortunately, where we're at with this country, I don't want to say that the opinion on abortion has shifted to where people just accept it as is. I wouldn't say that. But certainly when it comes to the higher courts system, it's like they're pretty firm on this idea that, and now it gets weird when they start pushing that term, like when it's an appropriate thing, like, okay.
Well, right, like viability, I mean, is what this case hinges on, right? Because now the technology is better, that you could say, okay, well, maybe the fetus could survive. Obviously, way more likely for a fetus to survive than back in, the 70s, whenever this happened. So, exactly. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going with that. So, the bizarre thing, I guess, is not just the term being constantly whether they're going to shift that post, move it back, move it forward. Like, okay, when is an appropriate time to, let's say, have an illegal abortion? What are those stipulations as far as when is the exception? When can that be made? Let them tell it. all of them are of the exception. Everybody is the mother's health hinges on this, and if she does have the kid, she's going to die versus not. Unfortunately, that's not the reality of the situation, but they control the conversation. Yeah. So who cares? That's basically what we have to accept it as. And yeah, you get women's rights organizations, and for those, I'm going to lecture you, Sarah, just on this. I know you don't understand that the only women's rights that exist are your right to have an abortion.
Apparently.
That's it. That's what it means to be a woman, is to have an abortion. Anything outside of that is women's rights. What's that? It's just, you need to be able to have an abortion, and those are your women's rights. That's how that works, and we'll see what the courts have to say about it. Which
is weird, because I feel like, as a mother, I feel like a big part of being a woman is like trying to keep the baby alive.
Interesting.
I do. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm just like one of those really overprotective mothers. So maybe that's just that coming out, right? But I feel like it's very, very contradictory to the whole idea of being a woman, being motherly.
It does seem that. It's an interesting take.
This is called Very, Very Insightful Opinions by Sarah Gonzalez.
Wow, that's a powerful segment. We got to continue this. When I heard this news today that the Supreme Court was going to take up the whole abortion issue, I had the same feeling that I have when I walk into a midnight movie theater showing of a new Star Wars movie. Like, I'm really excited, but it's probably going to suck. In the end, it's going to be disappointing. I'm going to feel let down. That's probably it. I mean, it is one of those things where I would be very disappointed if we went through, the Trump administration with 3 new justices that are much closer to what I want to be a Supreme Court justice than what the left would put in there, and they don't challenge this. I'm interested in the fact that they picked Mississippi. As you point out, 15 weeks is there are rules all over the country that have been passed for 20 weeks,
that are higher,
which you'd think would be an easier standard if you wanted to move in a pro-life direction. So I don't know if that means anything. Maybe this case is uniquely a good one for the pro-life cause. But part of me also thinks, look, we see John Roberts, and legitimately, there's no chance that John Roberts votes to overturn Roe versus Wade or anything close to it. No. That is not going to happen. He is lost. He's already on the left on that issue. So the question comes down to really...
What is he not on the left on?
Right, I know. So. There might be something, but it's very rare. There's a new profile of Justice Kavanaugh by McKay Coppins in The Atlantic that came out, I think, late last week. And I don't know. I am nervous with Kavanaugh. Yeah. Kavanaugh is... throughout, there's just litany of he's teamed up with Justice Roberts. They're together all the time. It seems like the guy he's really emulating. He wants to get back into polite society, so he really cares about what the New York Times thinks of him. Now, look, we don't know this for a fact. We don't know where he'll go. I'm nervous about Kavanaugh, though, being a long-term conservative, and he's just one. You have Clarence Thomas, you have Alito, you got 2. Outside of those 2, I don't know what happens with the court anymore. And I swear Republicans could name 25 justices and not get 5 of them to vote the right way.
Okay, but I want to go back to Kavanaugh for a second, because I do think it is interesting. I read part of what was it McKay Coppins? Yeah. Okay, I wasn't sure who wrote it, but I read part of that, specifically the part about how he wanted to emulate Roberts. But you mentioned that he, wants to go back to a polite society and all of these things. And it's like, if I'm him, and I was treated the way that he was treated from places like the New York Times, from all these places, I'd be like, screw you. Yeah. I am voting conservative over and over and over. And I get it that that's not, his job is to rule in favor of the Constitution. But I think you can easily do that and still be on the conservative side every single time. So it's just bizarre to me that he's developed this weird, Stockholm syndrome with these people.
Yeah, that's a lot. There's a lot of that in the piece. It's kind of like the focus. That's what conservatives want, right? You could look at that, and I don't think this is necessarily true with Clarence Thomas, but you could look at that, they abused him so badly in his hearings that he was screw it. Yeah. Now, I think Clarence Thomas, honestly, would just said screw it no matter what happened.
Right.
Because he just cares about the Constitution. But Kavanaugh is a different animal. They talk about Clarence Thomas, Alito. They don't care what the New York Times says. They just say, screw it, we're going to do what we want to do. Roberts is different, and they say Kavanaugh is the same breed of a person who who, while conservative, lived in polite society in Georgetown and like hobnobbed with all the left-wing people, and the left-wing people would take him out to dinner and they'd have a good conversation. They'd all realize that they're all smart and they have some differences, but we all live in this same civilized society, right, guys? And he likes that. The frat boy thing was sort of played up in, he drinks too much and who knows what happened back in the day. And a lot of that was nonsensical, but the piece sort of portrays that as like, it's not that they don't say that he was drinking and abusing people, but he likes to have a beer with you. He likes to be the guy that hangs out with you, like who can have a bunch of friends and everyone can go and laugh whether they have political differences or not. And so he's a people pleaser in that way, and that's a dangerous thing. That's the last thing I want out of a Supreme Court justice. I want the guy who's going to sit there in the corner and be the only vote on every single bill if he thinks the Constitution says he should. I want him to be a shut-in if he has to avoid any of those outside influences. And unfortunately, these are not robots, they're people, and these personalities play a big role here.
Absolutely. Well, that's the nature of, unfortunately, not just that court system, rather, but really everywhere in this country, this moronic idea that these justices or judges sit up there and just rule without any sort of bias, or that would be lovely, would it not, if they were robotic in that regards. But unfortunately, some people are like that. And that was the case that I was making about this when we were talking about the whole Kavanaugh situation, is that do not think that just because this person they can say all they want, but when it comes down to it, how they rule, generally, it's not objective. Unfortunately, for a lot of them, it's, hey, what side, do I need to go? How are people going to react? And unfortunately, that bleeds in on how they will rule. Ultimately, it's not always objective. By the books, it's about liberty. Wouldn't that be a great thing? If that was the case, it wouldn't be a Supreme Court, as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm. All right, we've got more to come. First, we want to thank our sponsor, Taser. So listen up, especially those of you who may be unfortunately living in places where the government makes it very hard for you to exercise your First Amendment rights. You got to protect your family, all right? That is your number one priority. Taser's line of non-lethal self-protection devices are small and lightweight enough to carry with you or in your glove compartment or your purse. Any women out there, they are powerful enough to incapacitate an attacker. They are very safe, easy to use. They use an electrical charge to immobilize attackers for up to 30 seconds. That gives you time to escape. You can go to wherever you need to get to send emergency dispatch to your GPS location. Now, those of you, we're big Second Amendment advocates here, but I know there are some people, maybe you have an older mom or, a relative who just isn't comfortable handling a firearm. Unfortunately, that is the name of the game sometimes. And like I said, sometimes government makes it very hard for you to own a firearm to protect yourself. These people need some sort of self-protection devices, all right? Start protecting yourself and your family with Taser today. It is available without a permit in most U.S. states. You can take advantage of their best offer available. Save $60 on the Pulse Plus bundle. That is a Taser Pulse Plus device, cartridges, and a holster at Taser.com. I have one. It is amazing. You can save $60 right now. It is Taser, TASER.com, promo code Y. The U.S. approved a massive $735 million sale in weapons to Israel today. This, of course, comes as the nation has been battling Palestinian attacks for over a week. Let's see. Secretary of State Blinken spoke today with Egyptian Foreign Minister Shukri to discuss the ongoing violence in Israel, West Bank, and Gaza. All parties need to de-escalate tensions. The violence must end immediately. We talked about this last week. You were on the show. And we watched I know you saw it, Stu, the incredible footage that they've been getting from Israel of the Iron Dome intercepting all of these rockets that have just been, there's just a constant barrage of rockets being fired at them. But Eric, I know you brought up the point last time we talked about this, that the U.S. is kind of funding both sides of the conflict. That kind of creates an issue.
It's crazy how that works when you fund both sides of wars. You get more conflict. It's almost like they have something to gain from it. This has been a very fascinating thing for me to watch play out. I'm gonna I'm not gonna sidestep kind of the point there, but as far as it pertains to publicly, the Democrats, the AOCs of the world, definitely those newer cats, they have a voice now, and they're really kind of, I don't want to say anti-Israel. That sounds kind of corny.
I'd
you
say
would
they're
say that?
anti-Israel.
All right, you would say that.
Yeah.
See, my thing is that they have at least applied like pressure, because I guess Biden comes from a different school of thought as it pertains to international conflict. Certainly as it pertains to, Israel. So it's going to be interesting to see that whole conflict and how that plays out, because they've already come out. I was watching Ayanna Pressley the other day talk about, she's basically, Israel bad, we can't be doing this, we can't be doing that. And, we know AOC's pretty much echoed the same sentiment. And that's a more neutral, what the Secretary of State is saying, more neutral standpoint of, okay, y'all need to de-escalate this situation so that, we don't have all of this conflict. But I really don't, and I'm just going to be as objective as I possibly can here. I don't know what the solution is, believe it or not, because it's always, like I said on last week's show, chicken first, egg first. I don't know, because no matter who it is that you ask, doesn't matter if you're there or here, who started the conflict, I think at this point is irrelevant, because the conflict is still the conflict. And I don't want to get so tied up into, well, they had a right, Palestinians have a right to exist. Well, where we're at right now, what is the actual solution? Because that conflict is still a thing. And we know America has been in the ear. It's funny talking about Egypt again, but America has been in the ear of both sides. Remember that leaked information that what's the press secretary, Psaki? And she completely said, we're not gonna talk about the leaked information that came out where they were, I think it was Iran, that they were discussing, well, Israel's trying to attack you and all this. Playing both sides, what the American government loves to do, the federal government loves to do. I don't honestly know what the solution is going to be out of it, but it's going to be more interesting to see that conflict within, let's say, that Democratic Party. Where is Biden going to be on this situation? Because this is ultimately what his actual job is, being the commander in chief, not that other stuff that he does. This is where it's at. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, we went through a period with Trump in which it was very clear what, that he saw Israel as an ally, and he was going to absolutely side with Israel and their right to defend themselves. We had a flare up in 2014, then we kind of an odd cooling off period for 4 years, and then here we are again with another conflict, with it rising up. As you point out, it's always been going on. But you could go back and chicken and egg this thing back, hundreds and thousands of years.
Yep.
The current state of affairs was that both sides were existing and pretty much couldn't stand each other, but weren't actively firing rockets at each other. Right. And that was broken by Hamas firing rockets.
Yes.
Okay.
And, we can go back, and I think you could talk, you might be look at this and say, well, Israel did something wrong in 1967 or whatever. We're here.
Yeah. That's exactly what the conversation that we have to have.
Yeah,
yes,
we're here. And you can't just start firing rockets at a civilian population. You just can't do it, especially when the other side of the argument here has the Iron Dome, so it's going to block 80 or 90% of them, and then has much far superior firepower to come back and do damage to you, which, of course, as we've seen, they have done with a relative amount of precision. But of course, these things aren't always pretty. I think with that knowledge, if you're Hamas, there's obviously just crazy people who want to kill Jews for, at any cost. But there's also a testing going on here. There's a way of testing. What is the Biden administration going to do?
Yes.
Are they going to stand with Israel? Because I don't know. Are they? We knew Trump was going to do it, but are they going to do it? And I think there's a testing going on here. They want to see how we're going to react to it. And it's been interesting. The example that I think is really interesting is this AP building where all the media was gathered that they gave notice to and then knocked down, saying Hamas was there. Now, AP is saying, we don't know what's going on. We've never seen anything. There's, of course, previous reporting indicating that quite clearly they knew that there was behavior from Hamas in this building. But Israel's we gave a smoking gun to the United States. And look at the way the United States is reacting. They're selling weapons to them, right? They're making statements saying, Israel has a right to defend themselves. I think what we have here is a situation where that smoking gun was real. They did know that there was something going on in that situation. So, look, I don't trust the Biden administration at all. I don't trust their judgment at all. I don't want to see inflammation on either side of this. However, the AOCs of the world scare me on this stuff. Like they are. I do think that they go above and beyond the normal. Like, I don't think Israel is doing the right thing here. I do think there's an anti-Semitic, especially with Ilhan Omar.
It's funny how they can get away with that. That was I was talking about this on my show, like how they can get away with that and it not be seen as this sort of anti-Jewish position. Yeah. Yet Gina Carano makes one freaking compare, and it's like, oh, she just hates the Jews, and all she did was make a comparison as far as how it went down, how that escalated, how that situation came about, and you wonder how does a guy come into power? That's all she said. So it's always been funny to me that they use that community, that Jewish community, really to further whatever agenda it is that they want. It's like any other, they could get to say, okay, we're okay with this. And this is an unfortunate thing about what's going on out there, is that it's like we look at it as if it's a one size fits all, and it's pretty and it's in a bowl, and there's nobody that has no sort of malintentions that would want to do. Maybe it's based on their religion, maybe it's not, but they do want to do bad things to these people. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle that they're on. And unfortunately, that gets lost when having the conversation, because it's like people hate X side, usually it's the whoever the American, who they think they're funding more than the other. That's the objectively bad one. So no matter what, if there are actual like terrorists or anything that want to do bad, it's kind of how we talk about war. It's like it's a unique situation, and we'd be doing ourselves really a disservice if we don't honestly acknowledge that it's not as black and white. That's more of the term that I was looking for, as what we like to believe when it comes to not just what's going on with Israel and Palestine and the Palestinians, but really what's going on all around as it pertains to the Americans playing world police. It's not as black and white.
Yeah, last words, Joe.
I'll just say, look, Israel can defend themselves. They should be able to have that opportunity, and they should be able to do it on their own. They're really good at it. They're really freaking good at it. So we don't need to be involved in all these things, but we also, I think, can take a moral stand and say, like, look, there's two things going on here. One is a recognized terrorist organization firing into Israel. The other, you might not like the proportion of their response. You might not like lots of things about what they do. You might not like how they handle the situation overall. But, like, it's incomprehensible. We would never allow it. We would never allow, if Toronto started firing missiles into our country, we would never allow it to stand. And while it's not our job to defend them, it is theirs, and they should have that opportunity.
Yeah. All right, we've got more to come. First, we want to thank our sponsor, Omaha Steaks. So you got to get ready for summer, because the benevolent overlords of the government have told you guys that you are allowed to gather in backyards and have backyard barbecues. Congratulations, by the way. Yay. Great job, everyone.
We did it.
Your government told you that you're allowed to do that now, and you need Omaha Steaks to get that done. You got to go to omahasteaks.com. This one's a little bit tricky, so you go into the search bar and enter keyword Y. WHY, to get the Let's Go Grill package. Today, you're going to get a great savings. You're also going to get 12 ultra juicy burgers for free. That's like 4 pounds of free burgers. And these burgers are amazing. My kid asks for them all the time. Everyone's going to love them. To top it off, you're also going to get $20 off on your first order. This includes it all. It's filet mignons, boneless pork chops, a pound of chicken breast, kielbasa sausages, and so much more. We are going to load you up for the summer. Everyone who comes over is going to love you because it's all delicious. All right. And maybe you are the cook. You're the grill master of the family. You got to get it. Maybe you're the person like me who likes to eat everything that gets grilled. You're going to love it too. It's a win-win for everyone. You got to go to omahasteaks.com. Use that code YWHY in the search bar and get those 12 free Omaha Steaks burgers and $20 off at checkout. It is omahasteaks.com. All right, a commander in the Space Force has been fired for comments he made during a podcast appearance where he warned that Marxism is infiltrating the United States military. This is Lieutenant Colonel Matthew Lohmeyer. He was the commander of the 11th Space Warning Squadron. That sounds so cool. I'm sorry. I can't, the 11th Space Warning Squadron. That's awesome, at Buckley Air Force Base in Colorado. And he was relieved of his post because he said, hey, Marxism and critical race theory it's all happening in the military. And he was, of course, promoting his book on this podcast. He had just recently written a book about it. And Space Force spokesperson said this decision was based on public comments made by Lieutenant Colonel Lohmeyer in a recent podcast. And there is now an investigation on whether these comments constituted prohibited partisan political activity. Lieutenant Colonel says this was not a political activity. This is just, you can't have a military that's focusing on things like Marxism at ground level. So it's still kind of an ongoing controversy here. What are your thoughts?
Well, so it's funny because a lot of folks looked at that and they said, well, this is proof because of the firing. It's proof that he was correct. I would go as far as they already admitted that themselves, particularly on the latter part when it comes to this whole critical race theory and everything. I mean, if you've been paying attention at all to not just the military folk, but CIAs of the world, they're really
all their ads
all their ads, they're really focusing on this whole diversity element and aspect of, like, as if that's their strength, which fortunately when you fight someone else, that doesn't even matter.
Wait, are you saying that if we're in conflict with another country, they don't care if you have two lesbian moms?
No, that's irrelevant.
Are non-cisgender?
Yeah,
they're not going to stop and ask you that?
No, that's not. But no, that's so. We already knew he was correct based on that in itself. So yes, maybe him being asked to or demanded to be stepped down from his post is, I'd argue that he's probably better suited out of that because he probably could say more if he's not in that particular role, which has been my argument. I mean, you're probably way more useful in the private sector anyway. But we already knew what this was, so that is the news.
He also says that he was given the option to have his book reviewed at the Pentagon's pre-publication and security review, but was informed that it was not required. So he was informed that it was not required, and now he's relieved of his post, I guess.
Apparently it was required.
It was not required.
Right. It's like strongly encouraged, but not required.
Yes.
It's first of all, it's weird because am I the only person who has a hard time understanding that Space Force is real?
I know. That's why I was like 11th Space Warning Squadron? What? This is so weird.
I feel like that was like one of those like ideas, like buying Greenland, that Trump just threw out there. It was like never really going to happen, and now we actually have a Space Force. It's like really there.
And people are getting fired because it's apparently Marxist now.
So
That's weird.
Yeah, look, I mean, everything I've heard of this guy seems like he's a really upstanding person and a person who cares about what the military is like on the inside, and we need more people like that to speak out. I mean, I think that's an important part. Usually there are times when you have to just resign and say, look, this is more important than what we're doing here. It does not seem like, saying something like you think the military is in danger because of a certain philosophy should warrant you losing your gig. That does not seem like the right way of handling this, especially when they had the opportunity to do something about the book before it came out. If you want to have the military, I think, has a pretty wide berth to make even irrational personnel decisions. Like they should do whatever is going to help their branch the most. They don't necessarily need to have our little rules that we have out here in the civilian sector. They should be able to fire people they think are damaging pretty easily. That being said, this is someone who's standing up to make it a better place, not a worse place. So obviously it's
depending on who you ask.
Yeah, right. I know, and that's the thing.
By the way, his book is called Irresistible Revolution: Marxism's Goal of Conquest and the Unmasking of the American Military. I think it's available on Amazon. We got to take a break. Back in a minute.
You almost seem like you wanted people to buy it.
I just said if
that's what it seemed like. I don't know.
All right, don't forget, I'm talking to you, the one who's watching on YouTube or Facebook or Blaze TV, wherever you are watching this podcast. Make sure that you go over to wherever you get your audio podcast, subscribe, rate, and review the news and why it matters. It will help more people be able to find this show, and then less people who have to resort to listening to Potato Head Brian Stelter and people like that. We don't want people listening to CNN, all right? They need to get the real news. Also, if you write a nice review, we may read it on air, like the one today from Nana 2014 Shelia. Okay, so Nana has given us some presidential pair-ups. All right, so DeSantis, and then with President Trump as vice president. Okay, Vernon Jones president with Tim Scott. Christine Noem as president with Candace Owens, VP, and then Chip Roy, who I guess Nana is so thrilled with.
He just does both roles.
He doesn't need a vice president. It's just him. So I don't know. DeSantis, president, Trump, vice president. Personally, I love.
I don't think Chip Roy was going to be president, but I think he would be a good president if he
I'll take an actual chip. Like
just a chip.
Chip being president.
That is the most libertarian thing I've ever heard in my life. All right, don't forget, you can go to BlazeTV.com as well. Make sure to subscribe. You can use promo code NEWS for $10 off.
I would totally vote for Doritos for president.
Totally.
Rancher.
100%.